Hey guys, thanks for joining Middle Class Reactions. Today we're going to be taking a look at the argument that's going back and forth with all the Tesla stuff, and now part of the Trump team's coming out saying it's domestic terrorism, and we're going to see some of the arguments from that. And as usual, you're going to see someone from the left immediately go to, oh, this is racist. Somehow that's where the conclusion went in his head, but we're going to take a look at that, and I'm going to tell you what I think. So let's get started.
This is domestic terrorism.
Yeah, these are real enemies.
Like, I think that they actually want to kill me.
When you can literally murder people and not be labeled as a domestic terrorism, how is it that burning some cars or vandalizing the windshields makes you a domestic terrorist?
Firebombing of Teslas is unbelievably dumb. It's so dumb, I originally thought it was like a false flag operation.
We shouldn't refer to past instances where we failed to identify terrorism as a reason to not call this terrorism.
Protesting because Elon is gutting our federal government. We have a complete oligarch running this country.
Say hypocrisy. The so-called Tesla takedown movement is going global, with 500 demonstrations planned at showrooms across the world. So far, the campaign against Elon Musk company has taken the form of demonstrations, calls for a boycott and the dumping of stock. But there have also been outbreaks of vandalism, with Teslas being damaged and dealerships firebombed. Some websites, meanwhile, are even doxing anyone who owns a Tesla. At the weekend, Pam Bondi appeared on Fox to issue this stark warning.
Not isolated incidents, as you know, and these aren't vandals. These are Molotov cocktails. That could be a weapon of mass destruction that they're throwing in.
Okay. Pam Bondi, I do. Overall, I think she's not doing a bad job. That's crazy. I hate what's going on with the Tesla stuff, but calling that a weapon of mass destruction, that's actually crazy. It's not that.
Tesla dealerships, that they're lighting these Tesla charging stations on fire that are in residential neighborhoods. I mean, it could cause tremendous damages, and people need to know the 3 people in custody right now, they will receive severe and swift consequences, and they are facing up to 20 years in prison. We are not negotiating these. We are not coming off these charges. We are looking at everything, especially if this is a concerted effort. This is domestic terror.
Yeah, being a vandal, when the federal government gets involved and you're being a vandal like that, I mean, you ought to know better. Like with this current administration, you ought to know better than to just go firebomb like, you should know, if you're going to go do that, if you get caught being the owner of that company of Tesla is working for the federal government, you don't think the feds are going to come down hard on you? Like, that's just stupid.
Terrorism.
Well, the official Tesla takeover action group say taking down Elon Musk is the only way to save democracy. Critics claim this could be BLM Mark II if it's not stopped now. Here to debate this, a social commentator, Kaizen Asiaju, who Elon Musk has recommended to his millions of followers as a clear thinker, the author of User Magazine, Taylor Lorenz. Pastor.
If you don't know, she is someone who is happy that the that healthcare CEO who worked for, I think it was United Healthcare, straight up was happy that that dude got murdered. She kind of crazy.
And radio host Bishop Talbot Swan.
Never seen him
going to be
before
joined
either.
by the founder and CEO of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, in a moment. Okay, welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, if I may, Kaizen. It seems to me, if people are chucking Molotov cocktails at car lots full of Teslas without any knowledge of who might be in the cars or who might be manning the stations, that is an act of domestic terrorism, isn't it?
Clearly. I mean, terrorism is defined as the systemic use of terror to accomplish a political end. So this is quite literally terrorism. Now, the entire movement isn't terrorism, but absolutely someone taking a Molotov cocktail to throw at the private property of other middle-class citizens is not only terrorism, it's just ineffective. So I think there are people who maybe feel sympathetic to where that person is coming from. But for those people, I would ask, well, what is this actually accomplishing at the end of the day? How does this move us forward?
Right, Bishop Talbot, what's the response to that?
Well, I think that language.
Same page. I just looked up domestic terrorism is defined as activities that involve acts dangerous to life or are intended to to intimidate or influence or affect the conduct of government by intimidation or coercion. Additionally, it can be described as violence committed by individuals or groups for their ideological goals stemming from domestic influences such as political, social, racial, or environmental motives. In essence, it refers to terrorism where the perpetrator targets their own country. So, per Microsoft Bing, that is the definition of domestic terrorism. In short, if you're committing to violence to have any political gain of any kind. Simple way to put it.
Matter, and it's important. I think anyone who is conducting such acts is certainly conducting a criminal act that should definitely be checked, and they should be prosecuted if found responsible. But what I see happening in America, as it has always happened, is when poor people, when marginalized people, when it's Black Lives Matter protesters, when it's non-white immigrants, they get the label of terrorist.
This dude's already pissed me off. He's already making me mad.
However, the label of frustrated citizens gets applied when violent white men shoot up churches or synagogues or schools, or when they storm the Capitol and violently damage the.
There it is, the magic words of January 6th. So this guy just started out 30 seconds ago saying he's going to go immediately into make this a racial issue. If you notice what he said, if it's marginalized people, it's considered domestic terrorism. If it's white people, it's not considered domestic terrorism. Who does he think is firebombing the Tesla dealerships? It's pissed off liberal white people, one that looked like a tranny dude thing, and I think it was two other dudes that have been arrested so far. All white guys. And the government's going after them for domestic terrorism. That's what they're calling them, domestic terrorists. So off the hat, this dude's already discredited. Just off the face of it. Because he didn't come into this. You can already tell he didn't come into this and look into anything. He just immediately wants to make this about race. Immediately. And if you, as we keep watching, you'll see how bad it gets.
It's the building, hurt police officers, defecate on the premises and try to take over the government. And so I'm not against people criticizing these acts of criminal activity. What I am against is the blatant double standard by law enforcement coming out from the gate without doing an investigation or anything and calling it domestic terrorism from the very gate. They didn't call.
Okay, he just said they didn't do an investigation. They're literally arrested. They've arrested people already for it. In my hometown today, in good old Texarkana, Texas, there was someone arrested for this very thing, for damaging, I think it was 3 Teslas. And they're looking at him for more. What is this guy even talking about that they didn't do an investigation? The other thing, he wants to talk about hypocrisy and a double standard. He wants to bring up January 6th. I'll talk about it. What about the double standard of the entire Summer of Love that was the BLM riots? What's the double standard there that almost nobody there was arrested? The people who were arrested, the vice president held multiple fundraisers to bail them out. They literally took over police departments, as in kicked the police department, boarded up the windows, boarded up the doors, set police cars on fire, killed dozens of people. I think it was by the end of it, including police officers, burned down parts of cities. Okay. None of those people got arrested for anything crazy. January 6th, think about it what you want. Most of those people who were arrested did not do anything. They did not commit acts of violence. They didn't. Some did. For the people who did, if you want to make the argument that, they should still be in jail, that is an argument to make. But the vast majority of them did not. And they spent years in prison. A lot of them didn't even have indictments. Where's the hypocrisy there? Where's the hypocrisy? This dude's already got me mad.
Call what Timothy McVeigh did domestic terrorism. They didn't call what Dylan Roof did when he murdered 9 people in a church domestic terrorism. When Robert Bowers was the mass murderer at the Tree of Life Synagogue, they didn't call him a domestic terrorist. So when you can literally murder people and not be labeled as a domestic terrorism, how is it that burning some cars or vandalizing the windshields makes you a domestic terrorist?
Well, I mean, I'll come to Taylor. I would personally categorize.
Okay, let's look at the definition of domestic terrorism again. In simple, it is committing acts of violence against property or people to make a political gain. A political gain. That's very important here. And politics encompasses a lot. But any political gain, by the definition, what they're doing is domestic terrorism. By the definition.
Categorize all those things you just said as acts of domestic terrorism,
as what
it's worth, and I think I did at the time. Taylor, I mean, look, on a wider point here about Elon Musk, he was the liberal darling. People like you would, I don't know, but I'm guessing, would have been drooling over Musk, a genius, bestriding the world like a liberal colossus.
People forget about this. Elon Musk voted for Biden in 2020. People don't realize that. And a lot of the people that are super off at him now, Elon Musk at one point was the darling of the Democratic Party. Ultra billionaire, super smart, which he is both of those things, obviously. But at the time, he was a Democrat voter. And they'll get into this in a little bit, but he's super pro gay rights as far as like not your insane like transgender rights and all that stuff, but your normal just gay dude or gay woman wanting to be gay. Like he's super pro for that. Okay. He was the Democratic darling. And then now that he's flipped, and we'll get into why he did that later because he's very openly talked about it. Now they hate him, completely hate him. And they hate him more because that he sides with Trump. And I think they actually hate him more than Trump right now, which is actually kind of crazy. I never thought I'd see that. They're actually protesting him more than they are Trump, which is, that's impressive.
Putting all the world to rights with his green energy, his SpaceX and so on. Now he's the most hated man in the liberal world, even more hated than Donald Trump to liberals. What has happened here?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to clarify that I am absolutely not a liberal. But yeah,
really? How would you categorize yourself?
Independent, politically independent.
Really? You're not to the right, though, are you?
I mean, I think I agree with the right on certain
Just so you all know, she's actually insane.
Issues. I mean, when they talk about free speech, I wish they would live up to those ideals, but I certainly believe in, limited government intervention in speech. But to get back to your question, I think it's interesting because Musk really used Tesla to appeal to this liberal audience. As you mentioned, he was a liberal darling. Obama loved him, right? This is what got him all of his praise. And I think a lot of people now, liberal Tesla owners especially, feel betrayed. I mean, I live in LA and it's hard to see a Tesla without one of those bumper stickers. I bought this before Elon went crazy. And I think it speaks to Elon's political pivot as well. Because let's not forget, just a couple years ago, Elon was tweeting, I believe in 2018 or 2019, if you don't support LGBTQ people, don't buy a Tesla, right? He
did say that,
leaning into that liberal ideology.
Did you support him then? Did you like him then?
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of any billionaire, to be honest. And Elon Musk has been a
Notice that she's scared to say it.
Billionaire for years, but I do think it's notable how his billionaire status has changed with the rise of Tesla. And that's what this movement's about, right? Back in 2011, 2012, Elon Musk only had $2 billion, massive amount of money, right? But nothing compared to the over $400 billion that he amassed back in December 2024. That was his current net worth. So I think it speaks to his political power, right? And the checks and balances.
Well, she's not telling y'all there. A lot of that net worth came from SpaceX. Just so you know, she's conveniently leaving that out because she wants to make it about Tesla. And Tesla did help. It did. But a lot of that jump in net worth came from SpaceX.
Balances. And the reason you're seeing people throw these Molotov cocktails, which I believe is not remotely anything that's happening in sort of any widespread fashion, but it's because they feel like they have no accountability. They feel like they can't work within the system, so they're going to work outside the system to get some sense of justice so that this billionaire can't just run rampant, dismantling our government with impunity.
Okay, so two things there. It's happening nationwide. We know that. It's happening more on the coastal cities, but it is happening nationwide. So it's more than just one or two people. The other thing, she just made the argument for what happened. She just made that argument. Oh, we feel like we can't work inside the system, so we're going to go outside the system. If you notice, and liberals do this a lot, the right does it too, but not near as bad as the liberals, mainly because the right isn't as violent as the liberals. Anytime you see with BLM, you're seeing it now with the Tesla riots or whatever you want to call them. When violence happens and it's for something that someone on the left and the liberal side is for, that's the argument they make. Oh, well, they don't have a choice. You saw this in the BLM riots. There's people straight up saying like, oh, it's during COVID. They don't have a choice because they can't pay their bills. So, they're going to riot because they're frustrated. It's completely insane. It's an insane ideology and an insane way to think. As soon as the right does something, again, think about what you want about January 6th. She just made the argument that most people at January 6th made. They felt like they were that election was stolen. They felt like that their government wasn't being honest and truthful about what was going on. So that's the result that you got. Again, like or hate what happened on January 6th, not making the argument for it nor against it. I'm just saying she just made the argument for him. But when the dude over here on the right side of the screen was saying how those are domestic terrorists, she was over here nodding her head away. And then as soon as they're talking about some violence that happens for something she's for, oh, now it's just frustrated people. Crazy.
But here's the deal. Look, he went on Joe Rogan a couple of weeks ago, and he said this.
I mean, I don't know. It's pretty stressful, actually.
Yeah, these are real enemies.
Like, I think they actually want to kill me. And the reason I know this, well, they say so online. There's like Reddit forums where they don't just want to kill me, they want to desecrate my corpse.
I mean, don't just want to kill him, Taylor. They want to desecrate his corpse. That's how he feels.
Welcome to the internet. I read stuff like that about myself all day. I mean,
Really?
it's reality. Yes, Piers,
People
it's reality.
want to kill you and desecrate your corpse.
I read that every single day. And not just that, horrible graphic threats. Unfortunately, that's the internet. And if you challenge power, that is what you are going to be faced with every day, especially if you're a woman or a marginalized person. And, I don't like it, but that is the reality.
These people are going to
now, it's good to see that Elon is at least acknowledging that, people are angry with him. That's something that we haven't seen before. He normally just rants and goes into denialism and sort of refuses to even acknowledge the pushback.
Piers Morgan Uncensored is the Better Business Bureau.
Sponsor.
First class customer 532.
Nope.
It's not like he's Piers. That's P866. Guys, I find it fascinating that Musk has gone on this big Damascene conversion to Trump. But a lot of his personal positions haven't changed. It's not like he's become...
By the way, it's the same for Trump. A lot of his personal positions have not changed since the interviews he was doing on Oprah Winfrey in the 80s and 90s. His positions haven't changed.
A conservative Republican in terms of the way he views the world. I don't think that's happened at all. He's got the same views that he had about pretty much all of the social issues out there, except he now backs Trump full on. But in terms of, well, you're shaking your head, Taylor, but in terms of his view of the gay community, in terms of his views of green energy, in terms of his views of climate change, all these things. Yeah, but he hasn't changed his mind about those things, has he?
Yes, he has. Yes, he radically has changed his mind towards his
about which one of those things? Green energy? No. LGBTQ community? No.
Yes, absolutely.
How?
What are you talking about? He went from supporting LGBTQ DEI initiatives at Tesla to now trying to dismantle DEI and disown his trans daughter. So he has...
there it is. There it is. Okay. This infuriates me. This whole panel, not the whole panel, but this episode infuriated me watching it. Okay, so Musk has openly talked about this. He has a son that was coerced into by his mother and I'm assuming whatever school teachers were around, but that's a different conversation. Someone coerced his son who was probably gay, into thinking, oh, you're a trans girl. And then went full blown, I think went as far as the surgery. I could be wrong on that, but at least got onto the medications, full like hair, dress, makeup, like full in it. Musk has openly said that the way he feels, the left woke ideology stole his son from him, which it did, and made his son a woman. Now, what she just said, as Musk is trying to disown his trans daughter. He's not trying to disown his trans daughter. He's openly said, my son is dead. Which, if the son is living as a trans woman, the son's not there anymore. And for what it seems like right now, isn't coming back. So, as a dad, he's looking at it from the dad perspective, as they pretty much killed his son. Unalived. YouTube, don't get pissed at me. They took his son from him. We'll say it that way. They took his son from him. That's a lot of what got him to flip on a lot of this woke ideology. He's still very pro gay rights. He talks about that. He's still obviously very, well, he says he's pro environment. I have a bone to pick with that because the making of electric cars is horrendous for the environment, worse than any oil drilling, but different conversation. Really the main part of where his views changed is, and I don't even know if they changed, but he's very anti-transgender woke ideology now. And that's another reason a lot of the left hates him. And she just pointed it out. She just said it.
Has radically changed his views. He started back in 2021.
Falling out with his trans daughter doesn't mean he's transphobic, does it?
He has absolutely made, even the daughter aside, he has made it very clear where he stands on trans. He has promoted terrible, horrible, bigoted conspiracy theories about trans people.
Like what?
Bigoted.
Like what?
Like the false conspiracy theory that, trans people are groomers, and also that there were.
Is this lady is she delusional? Is she just going to pretend that a lot of we literally have trans and cross-dressing people going into schools with elementary kids. Has she never seen a video of I don't live too far from Seattle right now, a couple hours. She never seen the videos of the gay pride parade that happens in Seattle? A lot of the trans shenanigans that go on down there, just completely naked in front of kids. You tell me that's not grooming? Hell out of here.
Or, litter boxes in Texas schools for kids.
That is also a thing. Well, it tried to be a thing. The attempt was made. Thankfully, it got shut down in most places, but the attempt was made.
Kids that identify as animals, of course, that was completely debunked.
No one.
Completely false. He is constantly talking about the woke mind virus in relation to trans people. His views have completely evolved. He wasn't saying any of that back in the 2010s. He was, again, arguing that you shouldn't buy, if you don't like LGBTQ rights, you shouldn't buy a Tesla. That's a massive departure and a massive evolution. And by the way, he's admitted this evolution, right? This is somebody that came out as conservative, that was talking about, in 2022, when he announced that he was voting Republican, was talking about how, he's evolved his political beliefs.
All right, we've been joined by Cenk Uygur. Cenk, thank you so much for joining us.
This is also one of the biggest political hypocrites in this space. We'll get into it, but I have a bone to pick with him too.
Really appreciate you coming on. You're a last-minute call-up, but no less important than you normally are. Always a valued member of our punditry team. Let's just ask you, Cenk, where you sit on this idea that the firebombing of Teslas constitutes domestic terrorism. Do you think it does?
No. So,
by the definition of the law, it is. Like that or not, that's what the definition of law is.
Let's be clear about a couple of things. First of all, the firebombing of Teslas is unbelievably dumb. It's so dumb that it makes I originally thought it was like a false flag operation. Who would be so stupid as to gift wrap this kind of action for Elon Musk and Donald Trump? It's like, if I didn't know that it wasn't Trump and right wingers, etc. Anyway, I don't even want to get into how ridiculously stupid it is. So radical left, cut the crap out. And it doesn't apply to everyone on the far left. It just applies to these idiots who did it. Now, in terms of calling it terrorism, the word is disgusting. I hate it. We should never use it again. All it is hypocrisy on top of hypocrisy. So,
okay, so here's where I start to have the bone to pick. He was straight up calling half of the Trump movement, and he said half, racist and terrorists. He said it on the PBD podcast the first time he was on there. He's been on there twice. Straight up called half of America, or half of Trump voters racist. Pretty sure he used the word in there too. I know he's used it on multiple occasions. Pretty sure on the PBD podcast, he, if you don't know PBD, it's Patrick Bet-David. I know for sure he called half of Trump supporters very, very racist. Half America. Now the majority of America, racist. It's one of their favorite words.
Hamas says terrorism is terrorism. Israel does 50 times worse terrorism, not terrorism. So Tides Foundation is attacked. So that's George Soros's foundation, not terrorism. That's a physical, violent attack against human beings, not terrorism. An attack on cars, terrorism, right? Pipe bombs from a Trump supporter who does not represent all Trump supporters like this. These guys don't represent all of the left, but he does pipe bombs to all of Trump's political opponents, not terrorism.
Whoever did that, it is terrorism. It is an act of domestic terrorism. Do I believe that was an actual Trump supporter? No. Do I believe that maybe may not have been the FBI? We're gonna leave that for another day.
Dylan Roof says, here's why I'm doing it. I'm a political terrorist. I want to kill black people and start a race war. Not terrorism. We get him Burger King. But you attack cars.
Okay, on that kid, still domestic terrorism. The Burger King thing, I've heard this brought up so many. That is got blown way out of proportion. Was what that kid did horrendous and awful? Was he a domestic terrorist? Yes. By the definition, was he a domestic terrorist? Yes. One, why wasn't he unalived by the police? Because when the police showed up and pointed their guns at him, he did what they told him to do. That's how you don't get shot by the police. It's really not that hard. If you follow what the police do, you're going to be perfectly fine. Second thing, oh, they got him Burger King because he was a white kid. If you go to the police station or you're being questioned by the cops, they have to offer you food. They literally have to, legally. They just got it for him on the way to the police station. If you're being questioned by the police and you're going to be there for a while and you're being held, they have to feed you. Legally have to feed you. So I don't know why that one keeps getting brought up. But yes, was he a domestic terrorist by the definition? Yes.
Cars, terrorism. Now, the use of the word domestic terrorism is going to divide us all, is going to make us hate each other and turn inward. Last time we used...
Again, coming from the guy that called a violent racist, that's a crazy statement.
Verbiage like this, we attacked Iraq. This time, we're attacking ourselves. The neocons are back.
Also, he's another one of the people that was calling Trump Hitler for the last 8 years, 10 years now. Also calling Trump supporters Hitler apologists, Hitler supporters, Nazi apologists. Like, again, hearing this come from, and he's made the switch over the last like 6 or 8, I'd say 6 or 8 months. Since a little bit before the Trump election, because I think he could see the writing on the wall. He was one of the worst of it. Like, go watch some of the old Piers Morgan debates with him. He is insane. By the way, this is going to be a little bit longer of a video, guys. So just stick along with us.
Are back.
But if you're firebombing things with Molotov cocktails that create gigantic furnaces and you're doing it for political reasons, is that not a form of terrorism? And if it happens on American soil, is that not then just automatically domestic terrorism? You're completely right that many other things that have happened have been deliberately not labeled that for political reasons by the Republicans. But it seems to me that by the yardstick of what domestic terrorism constitutes, acting for political reasons in a very violent manner that imperils life, isn't that domestic terrorism?
Piers, if we go down this road...
Yeah, Cousin, I'll bring you in after check response to what I just said.
Yeah, Piers, this is a super dangerous road. And I have to tell you, I've been guilty of it too. So, look, I've used the word domestic terrorism and relates to countless right-wing attacks. The El Paso attack, they said, I'm trying to murder Latinos. Dylan Roof saying, I'm trying to murder black people. I'm trying to start race wars, et cetera, et cetera. And I've called that way. If we're going to call it terrorism, let's be consistent, et cetera. Now, those are never, ever, ever called terrorism. And if a right-winger ever does anything, it's never, ever, ever called terrorism. If Israel does it, it's never called terrorism. So I hate the word.
Why are we bringing Israel into this? I'm not a fan of Israel, like the government, but why is that where we're going?
Disgusting, politically loaded word. But much more importantly, even more important than all of that is, if we start calling each other terrorists, the left and the right, there's going to be no end to it. And it's going to lead to a civil war. And the other thing that you have to understand is this is a way to shut down all speech. Oh, now, okay, since 2 or 3 idiots did something violent, who did, by the way, who they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. There's very significant crimes here: arson, assault, battery, trespassing, 1,000 crimes you could charge them with. But we start calling each other terrorists, and no one will have any free speech left. I guarantee it.
Well, there's certainly an element of that. Kaizen, I'll bring you back in. I mean, I think there's been a lot of hypocrisy on both sides about this, actually. People use terminology when it suits them to suit their own side. There's no question of that. I've seen it happen on both sides. But I do think Cenk's got a point there. There is a slippery slope, isn't there? If everything starts being labelled domestic terrorism, because actually the vast majority of the Tesla protesters, and I suspect this will be the case when we see the demonstrations, if they're exercising their democratic right to peacefully protest, that's a fundamental bedrock of American society.
Exercising your right to protest does not mean you get to burn shit to the ground. Sorry for my language. Doesn't mean you get to do that.
Absolutely, and we should protect their right to protest. But I want to respond to something that Bishop said and what Cenk said by implication. The fact that there are double standards being applied does not mean that we should not apply the standard. It just means that we need to apply the standard consistently. So again, people are saying, yes, it's terrorism, no, it's terrorism. The first question we should start with is, what is the definition of terrorism? Terrorism is a systematic use of terror to accomplish a political end. If someone is lighting a Molotov cocktail, I don't care if they're white, black, brown, or something in between, that is an act of terrorism. Now, do they represent a fringe of the anti-Elon, anti-Tesla movement? Absolutely. And we don't need to paint everyone with the same brush. But we shouldn't refer to past instances where we failed to identify terrorism as a reason to not call this terrorism because we don't like the word. So this is what I see on both the right and the left. We have people pointing the
guarantee you when that guy who's second from the left there, guarantee he's going to bring up something about race. Guarantee it.
Finger at inconsistencies in the other camp to justify inconsistencies in their own camp. And if we continue to do that, no one will ever make progress. I also see a lot of cherry picking about certain ideals that Elon might espouse or certain things about his character, like, for example, the fact that he's a billionaire. Kamala Harris had 83 billionaires support her in the 2024 election. Donald Trump had 52 billionaires support him in the 2024 election. Also so true. People saying
Kamala Harris also outspent Donald Trump by a lot.
Billionaires, this is like a curse word that's being used conveniently while ignoring the fact that there are billionaires on both sides and more billionaires on the Democratic side traditionally. Now, to your point about LGBTQ rights and all of that, we should keep in mind that the position of the LGBTQ community has evolved over time. And I think that's totally fine. But I think early in the 2010s, no one was talking about biological males competing in sports with biological females. So there's a question here of, did Elon evolve his views? And also, did he leave the left or did the left leave him?
Yeah.
And besides all of this, I honestly think much of this is a distraction. I think the thing that we actually need to be talking about as leaders right now is, what is the pain that people are feeling? Why are they expressing it this way? How can we acknowledge that pain? And how can we put constructive solutions in place as leaders here on this show? And what can we ask the Trump administration to do to solve this wound? Because I see people who are in pain. I believe that the way that they're expressing it is not constructive, but there's a legitimate pain that needs to be acknowledged, and there's things that we can do to resolve that. So whether you like Elon or not, I think is honestly a distraction.
All right, here's where I disagree with this guy. And I didn't hear him say this earlier when I was watching this through the first time. We should acknowledge the pain of whatever it is these domestic terrorists, allegedly, so I get sued, think that they're doing. Like, that shouldn't be validated. You know, we shouldn't go up and baby them. Oh, I'm so sorry that you feel bad. You know, how dare you burn a Tesla and how dare you commit arson and acts of violence? Don't you do that, but I understand your pain. No, we should have none of that. Absolutely none. They need to go to prison. I'm not saying they should spend 50 years, but there needs to be a precedent set that, hey, if you do some acts of violence like this and you're going to commit this kind of violence and this kind of arson, this kind of, you know, degeneracy, there's going to be some serious consequences here. We need to nip this in the butt, because now it's getting to where, especially on the left, every time that something happens they don't like, oh, we're going to go burn stuff. So we need to nip that in the bud, and we need to hard.
We need to talk about the actual solutions that need to be introduced to solving the existential problems facing America, not whether Elon likes LGBT people or not.
American homeowners are at risk of a growing fix the fraud. I certainly was happy to him and get access to your personal title expert. That's HomeTitleLock. I certainly was happy to identify as a liberal a few years ago, but the progressive left got so nutty, I went a bit Bill Maher on them. It's like
the progressive left has ran off Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Joe Rogan, Trump, Elon Musk, people like Piers Morgan, Bill Maher. Bill Maher still has some insanity up in there, but a lot is better, I would say. Yeah, they're running away all of their best choices, and then are yelling and screaming, like you'll hear this all the time. Oh, we need a Joe Rogan for the left. You had Joe Rogan for the left. You had Joe Rogan. He was yours like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Then y'all went insane, said he's a horse dewormer on CNN, and then he left y'all. Like, what do you expect?
I have nothing in common with you lunatics. If you're going to try and challenge basic biology to my face, I have nowhere to go with you. So I do think a lot of people, and Elon Musk is one of them. I think Joe Rogan was another one. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard. There's a whole load of people who would have identified quite happily as liberals a few years ago who no longer feel comfortable doing so and have gravitated to Trump because they feel the progressive left went nuts.
Piers, I think we can't ignore the basic hypocrisy. That's not a Democrat versus a Republican thing. It's not a left versus a right thing. It is something that has happened throughout the annals of American history. There were acts of terror that were not classified that way under administrations that were run by Democrats. And so when you try to relegate everything that happened to the past, that's not an accurate assessment. They called Black Lives Matter protesters terrorists. They didn't.
Did he just like not see what was going on across the nation? Just ignore it. Like, just put blinders on. Oh, I'm not going to pay attention to that violence because it's something I'm a fan of. So we're not going to pay attention to that. This guy insane.
Didn't call the murderer of Heather Heyer in Charlottesville a terrorist. And you've got to be, I agree that you have to be consistent, but the same people that are crying over Teslas are the very people that are trying to erase Black history from the classrooms. And ignoring centuries of racial terror, of anti-Black racial terror. They're the ones who want to strip from the history books from our children the Tulsa massacre, the Atlanta massacre, the Chicago massacre, the Detroit massacre. They want to relegate those to historical footnotes or completely get rid of them at all. But
where's that happening? Where's that happening? Like, swear I feel my blood pressure raising.
Then burn cars to a national crisis and call it domestic terrorism. That's basic hypocrisy that is done in a white supremacist society that says what happens to Black people and brown people and marginalized people is not terrorism, but what
Trump has the most diverse cabinet, I think, out of any president. I could be wrong on that. But has this guy not seen his cabinet?
It happens to, and I'm going to use that big barbaric term of billionaire. What happens to this billionaire is.
I hear you, and you make strong points. I would say though that one of the reasons why DEI became so unpopular was because many people believed it was being utilized in a way to imply that everyone who's white is a white supremacist unless they could prove otherwise. And they felt the politicization of classrooms into thinking this was becoming a very insidious part of American society. And you know that. You're a smart guy. And I just think that it's too easy to dismiss it as nobody cares about Black history or Black. Of course they do. But at the same time, I've got 4 kids.
Did they show that by erasing it?
Wait, are you erasing it, or are you just removing this presumption that everyone is a white supremacist who's white until they prove otherwise? Okay, Kaiser, you come in. You were shaking your head.
So if you say, Piers, let me to push at your point. So if you say, if you stand up and you say that any institution of higher learning or any school system that is teaching Black history, we're going to withhold federal funds from those institutions. We're going to fine
It's not literally not what's happening. Trump is saying, hey, if you're going to keep DEI, which mainly is the argument here is mainly the affirmative action, which even schools like Harvard have been sued and lost. This is not a debate. This is not a question. It is happening in schools. What the Trump administration is doing is saying, if you're going to keep, again, mainly it's leaned towards affirmative action in your schools, we're not going to fund you, because that is, again, if we're sticking to definitions here, by definition, affirmative action is racist. So you're not erasing Black history. Black history has nothing to do with this. They're saying, hey, we're going to go off of merit. And so if you want to go off of affirmative action and other DEI processes, you're not going to get federally funded. Completely fair.
HBCUs up to the amount of their endowments.
Trump gave more money to HBCUs than any other president in his first term. Any other president. Wasn't even close.
And then allocate those funds and give them to white families who have been so-called discriminated against. And by the way, DEI, the biggest beneficiary of DEI were white women. DEI included veterans. DEI included LGBT.
That point is actually true. The biggest beneficiary from DEI overall was women. I have seen mixed stats of whether it was white women that benefited the most. But it is for sure DEI helped women the most.
LGBTQ, but for the purpose of the far right, DEI was a code word for Black folks, which is what galvanized them against DEI in the first place.
Okay, let's talk about that. Why did that happen? Because when you push affirmative action and saying, oh, hey, if you're white, we're going to make it harder for you this job or this college or whatever it is, this program. And then you're going to go, oh, hey, we're going to lower all the requirements for the Black people over here. What do you think is going to happen? Like, what do you think the recourse from that's going to be? Yeah, people are going to look at that like myself and be like, that's not really right. Because if I'm more qualified than the Black person next to me and he gets it just because he's Black, that means I lost it just because I was white. By definition, that's racism. If the roles were reversed and I got it for the sole reason I was white and the Black guy was more qualified than I was, but I still got it, this guy would be losing his mind. Absolutely losing it.
Galvanized them against woke. It's what galvanized them against CRT as well.
All right, let me bring in Kaiser, because you were shaking your head through a lot of what you were hearing there.
Yeah, so the first thing I'd wonder is, why are we talking about race at all? First of all, the guy who threw the Molotov cocktail was white, and he's being treated like a terrorist, not because of the color of his skin, because of what he did. If he was Black, I would say that's terrorism too. So I thought we're here to talk about the Tesla vandalism and what it's communicating about the needs of the American people. So let's bring this back to that. What's happening is that America is in decline. We have nearly $37 trillion of debt. We have a $2 trillion deficit. We are spiraling into bankruptcy. Someone needed to get a handle on that. We've tried multiple times over the last 25 years across administrations to bring efficiency to the government. With the exception of Bill Clinton, who saved maybe $130 billion, it's been abject failures. In 2011, Obama had Biden staff a committee to try to save billions of dollars when we actually need to save trillions, and they failed. So now a new approach is being tried. It's bringing in someone who has a proven track record of making efficient organizations in Elon Musk. So that's the thesis for why he's involved in government right now. There's many people who don't like that. I totally understand why. The idea of an unelected billionaire is it's anathema to a lot of people. I get that. But my question for a lot of the Tesla protesters is, what is your alternative solution for solving this incoming debt crisis? What is your alternative solution for getting America to a place where middle class?
All right, I haven't watched up to this point, so everything from here on I haven't seen. Guarantee you that Cenk is going to come in and say cut the defense by $400 billion. It's one of his favorite talking points.
People can afford homes. 1 in 5 millennials, my generation, think they will never be able to afford a home. So hold on, I'm not done yet, Taylor. When I am done, then you can speak. But please let me finish my point for now. So Bishop Swan, I very much care about Black people as a Black person myself. I think there's a massive distortion of what the Trump administration is doing with regard to race. But this is not a conversation about race, because if we enter an inflationary debt spiral, whether you're Black, brown, yellow, or anything in between, we are all going to be in a bad situation. So there's people on the left who are saying,
When your
hey, they don't like that
administration
Elon
pushes
cut
back,
62,000
when your
federal jobs.
administration
I totally understand
abolishes
that.
Just so you know, I did not blank out the other people. That's on the Piers Morgan's side of things.
But the
civil
question is,
rights,
how do you
you
get
can't say that's
efficient
not about
government
race.
without cutting jobs? How do you get efficient government without reducing costs? So I don't know why we're talking about race. I don't know why we're talking about these issues right now. We need to zoom out and talk about what's important and affects us all, irrespective of race or gender identity.
So when an
Very good point.
administration comes into office and immediately signs executive orders abolishing 60 years of civil rights gains,
He didn't do that.
From the gate,
One thing.
how can you say that has nothing at all to do?
He abolished affirmative action DEI. That's not civil rights gains. Fun fact, the black community as a whole, if you look at every statistic out there, has done worse civil rights post the civil rights movement than pre-civil rights movement. Fun fact.
To do with race. When they come in off the gate and they start they start abolishing Black history and threatening educational institutions that teach Black history. How do you say that is not about race? When they come in off the gate.
Can't threaten a school that just teaches Black history? Does that like get you is that like a safeguard? Huh.
And two people that they fire from the Joint Chiefs of Staff is a woman and a Black man.
Oh, no.
How do you say that's not about race? When they come in.
Maybe they sucked at their job. Did we think about that?
And they start talking about everything is going to be based on meritocracy. And then just about everybody they hire in their administration is unqualified for the positions that they hold, and they're all white men. How do you say?
Okay, but obviously this guy hasn't looked at Trump's cabinet because it's an extremely diverse cabinet. Guarantee you unqualified. He's talking about Pete Hegseth and RFK. Two white guys. Different conversation. Not going to go into that because this video is going to end up being an hour and a half long. But yeah, this guy's going to give me an actual shock.
You say that's not about race. I agree with you that the people are in pain and the people that are hurting. But I suggest to you that the public response to Elon Musk, to Tesla, is not random. It's a reaction to real harm. Workers losing health care, civil rights rollback, DEI elimination, education.
What civil rights have been rolled back and who's lost health care?
Whitewashing. And so when justice is denied, people don't remain silent. They resist. It means they want to be heard. MLK said the riot is the language of the unheard.
As you were talking,
again, another person who just made the exact argument for January 6th, even though he was talking down on January 6th earlier. He just made the argument for it. And then he's going to go off and talk about hypocrisy. It's kind of funny.
To answer that question.
Hang on one second. Hang on. As you were talking there, Bishop Thomas.
Okay, we're going to leave it off right there. They from that point on, I have watched, and they go into a whole different subject. This is focus on for the day. Yeah, so I mean, it's just not true that this is about race. I don't know why he brought that into it, but you can see where the left automatically goes. This dude here was worse about it than she was, but they're both actually insane. And I don't agree with a lot on Cenk. I think he's a grifter. I think he saw the writing on the walls, and he's now trying to like cozy up with the Republican side more. But let me know what y'all think, guys. This is the argument that we're seeing a lot right now from the left side is, oh, they feel bad, so we need to be more understanding that they're committing actual domestic terrorism. So if I just feel bad, can I go to my local government and commit shenanigans? We'll say. Is that like, okay, hey, I don't like what my government's doing, I'm going to go burn the government building down. Not actually going to do that, YouTube. But like, is that our thing? Hey, I got a speeding ticket. I really don't like the Washington State Patrol, so I'm going to go commit some acts of violence against them. That's the argument there. And per his argument, he just has to go, oh, well, he feels unheard. So, what he's doing, there's a reason for it. It's okay. It is pure insane mindset, purely insane. And that's why I've said this for years, and I will always say this: the left is more violent than the right, and they're lucky, because if the right was more violent, the right owns almost all the guns. So they're lucky that they are very lucky that the right is violent as they want to make out to be. But okay, guys, let me know what y'all think. Thanks for tuning in today to Middle Class Reaction. Like, subscribe, comment down below, share with your friends, do all the things. And I appreciate y'all tuning in. I will catch y'all next time.